Good morning, everyone. To get us started, I'd like to do a little bit of crowd work. So raise your hand if you have green eyes. You can put your hands down. Now raise your hand if you write with your left hand. Now, of those people with their hands raised, keep them up if you write with your left hand and have green eyes. Take a look around the room. What I just created is a visual representation of the likelihood of a former foster child to go on to graduate college. My name is Laura Singer. I have green eyes, I write with my left hand, and am one of 3% of former foster youth who went on to graduate college. I'm here today to share my story and talk about how we can change these outcomes for kids in foster care. When I was in 3rd grade, a police officer arrived in the lobby of my school and had me ride with him in the back of his police car with my principal and 3rd grade teacher. Everyone had solemn looks on their faces that I thought I was on my way to jail and that my life was over. While my life didn't end that day, the trajectory certainly did. For the preceding 2 years, I was a ward of the state of New Jersey, where I was separated from my younger brother, shuffled between 13 different foster homes, and kept my belongings in a trash bag. This is the reality for more than 400,000 youth in care right now. Now, because I was in foster care, I spent a lot of time in court. I remember one day telling my social worker that I was going to be a lawyer one day. I remember her looking over in the front seat and laughing with her colleague before turning to me and saying, "I don't think you can be a lawyer. You've been through too much." Astounded that she thought little old me couldn't be a lawyer one day, I defiantly crossed my arms and told her, "I can do it, just watch." I didn't realize it then, but she wasn't trying to be mean. She was just repeating the system's message that kids like me don't make it. She was referencing the foster care to prison pipeline, where foster youth are more likely to end up incarcerated than go on to college and lead successful lives. Before they have a chance to write their story, the system writes the narrative for them. Eventually, I was reunited with my biological parents. One day I was in foster care, the next, I was expected to return to normal, except there was no normal. The judge had ordered my parents to move to a new town to give us the opportunity to start over. He forgot to consider that I was in middle school. With buck teeth and frizzy hair, plus being the new kid, I was already a prime target for bullying. Throw in the fact that I was emotionally stunted, you can imagine what I looked like. I struggled with making friends and was defiant with my adult teachers. Though I had aspirations of becoming a lawyer one day, by the time I got to high school, the vice principal sat my parents down and told them, "I don't think Laura can go to college." I started to realize that the adults in my life weren't just failing me. They didn't understand the foster care experience. There's a common misconception that if you're placed in foster care, then it has to be better than whatever it was you were experiencing at home. This couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, foster care is a breeding ground for abuse. I had one family who had home-cooked meals while I ate days-old leftovers. I had another family who pushed 2 couches in the hallway together. That was where I slept, but they told my social worker I'd have my own room. I had families hit me or just lie about my behaviors because they didn't want to deal with me anymore. And this is just what I'm willing to talk about. In all of this, the classroom was my safe space, but I was too independent and distrusting of adults that, I'll admit it, I was difficult to teach. And schools have a tendency to punish instead of provide support. But foster youth aren't just navigating school, they're navigating trauma. And when we respond to trauma with punishment instead of support, we're feeding the foster care to prison pipeline. Foster youth are overrepresented in the adult and juvenile justice systems. The highest indicator of whether they'll fall to the pipeline is school discipline. Foster youth are more likely to be suspended and expelled than their peers. But behavior is communication. And what's often labeled as misbehavior is usually just trauma in disguise. I experienced this right here in DC down the street mentoring my own foster youth. My 9-year-old mentee was struggling in school and received 2 suspensions in the span of 1 month. The school was becoming frustrated with her frequent outbursts and her consequences were only increasing. What they didn't realize was that her foster mom, who she had been living with for the last 2 years, was going to retire from being a foster parent at the end of the year. In foster care, living with a family for 6 months, nonetheless 2 years, is a big deal. Imagine knowing the exact day and time that the person you love the most is going to die. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Each day is one day closer to losing your stability. This was the experience of my 9-year-old mentee, but the school didn't know this. They just saw the behavior and they punished it. Stories like this are happening across the foster care system, but there are things that we can do to change the outcomes. First, we need to prioritize genuine relationship building. That means finding that delicate balance of letting a child know you're there for them without patronizing them. Foster youth have no reason to trust adults. When I was in the system, not only was I shuffled from home to home, I was in 4 different schools. When you live in this kind of environment, it's difficult to unlearn and even more challenging to believe that adults actually care about you. Next, part of what got me to where I am is years and years and years of therapy. But therapeutic services aren't guaranteed to kids in foster care. We cannot have therapy be a privilege in such a trauma-filled environment. We need to demand that foster youth have adequate access to mental health services at all times. Legislatively, the foster care system hasn't changed much since I was in the system 23 years ago. The foster care to prison pipeline largely remains unchallenged. I propose enacting legislation that targets this, something similar to IDEA, where students not only receive academic supports, but also cannot be suspended or expelled while they're in care. Even closer to home, we as adults can come together and understand the foster care experience. I share my story today because a lot of people know that foster care is bad, but they don't realize how it sets children up for failure. These interventions don't require radical reinvention, they require commitment and courage. So here we are, back to green eyes, left hands, and less than 3% of foster youth who go on to graduate college, when 100% deserve that opportunity. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be here right now, but courage is challenging systems even when they're stacked against us. Courage is a 9-year-old girl in the back of her social worker's car telling her, "I'm going to be a lawyer one day. Just watch." Somewhere along the way, someone molded my pain into leadership. We have the opportunity to be that someone today too. Foster care doesn't need our pity, it needs action. It needs people like you all, mentors, teachers, leaders, and advocates. People who are willing to see past a child's behavior and ask why. People who have the courage to build a relationship instead of punishing and excluding. People who have the courage to take on and dismantle the foster care to prison pipeline, one child, one relationship, and one policy at a time. Let's be the reason that a child doesn't have to be exceptional just to succeed. Because courage isn't just about beating the odds, it's about changing the system. Thank you.